He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
All right, welcome to the Marlowe Show. I'm Alex Marlow. Thanks for joining me today. Very busy news day today and a busy news weekend. I have some exclusive stories that are breakouts from Breaking the Law, which is on sale today. And again, if you're going to pick it up, today's the day to do it because ensuring I can get on some of those bestseller lists allows me to get the momentum popping up lots of different places, lots of new places, which is really exciting. I taped with Megyn Kelly today for the first time ever, never been on her show. I got Glenn Beck later in the week. Let's see who else. Oh, Scott Jennings' new show. We'll be doing that later in the week. So a lot of your favorite places will be popping up. Oh, Don Jr. later today, Lara Trump tomorrow, Dinesh next week. So it's fun. It's really nice to connect with some of my peers and colleagues because I've got a bit of an antisocial streak, not because of anything personal, just because I like my wife and children and I don't live anywhere near DC. But DC is a topic of conversation. And I'll tell you guys, I'll start from this point. When I got to Washington, D.C. In, I guess it was 2013, we got there. And we were having a blast. This is the very end of Barack Obama's administration, which was, even though I think Obama was a terrible president, was terrible for this country, he at least made it so that the center of the universe was really Washington, D.C., which is sometimes a bad thing, but overall you could do a lot worse. And it was just a fact that it was the coolest place in the world to be. It used to be LA, it used to be New York at different times, but at this time it was DC. And then when Trump came in, it somehow got way cooler. It was now the outsiders had now taken over the city. It was almost sort of like a party all the time. And it was tense in some ways, but I always liked that anyway because they always hated us and they hated me and they hated Breitbart. And then we were there, and I just had just a great time of my life. My wife was in medical school. We had this great beagle, Jobin, our dog. We also had Chip, our mutt, who's still with us today, barely hanging on. And I would work all day. I knew exactly what I was doing. I had my purpose, loading up headlines, loading up the front page of Breitbart, eventually getting into radio. And then I would have this great life where I'd roll out of my apartment and I'd jog past the Lincoln Memorial and jog down 24th Street, and jog down M Street and jog around Georgetown. I could walk to the White House. If I ever had a White House meeting, I could walk home from there, jogging down Prospect Street, which is one of the most iconic streets in the world, thanks to the scenes from The Exorcist, with cobblestone streets, just old-timey stuff. It was just such a cool lifestyle, and I could jog to the Lincoln Memorial. I could walk past the Washington Monument, which, of course, is one of the greatest monuments ever, because the fact that we, the United States of America, we chose to make the symbol of our country, of our first president, the guy who started all, a giant penis. Let's face it, that's what it is, big phallic symbol, stick it up in the sky in the middle of town. We did that. It is so in your face, so America. I had this great time there. But then by the time I got out of D.C., we ended up moving across the Potomac into Arlington when we had Master Marlowe. But it was still close by, D.C. adjacent. But by the time we left, mid-coronavirus, all the stores are boarded up. Everyone's bummed out all the time. Everyone's wearing masks. Every other store is either out of business or their windows have been smashed. It's just crime-riddled and just not safe. And just driving around all of a sudden had a totally different feel to it. It didn't feel like we were on the cutting edge of anything other than maybe the decline of America as we know it. And I can guarantee you, though I didn't go to D.C. quite as much, maybe, a couple times a year in the interim, I can guarantee you things just went downhill from there during the Biden administration. And Donald Trump comes in, he would have noticed. He would have noticed that's what was going on when he's driving around doing whatever it is that he's doing. And he hears about the crime, and he hears about things like we heard last week when Big Balls from Doge is getting beat up by gangs of thugs, teenagers roaming the streets on dirt bikes apparently, just beating people up. I documented a number of high-profile crimes in D.C. in, I think it was Breaking the News more, maybe Breaking Biden as well. But the city was deteriorating. And this should not be acceptable in the United States of America. This is our capital. This is what we broadcast out to the rest of the world. This is what the general perception of this country. If you only have a cheat sheet, if you can only do the Cliff Notes version of America, you're kind of looking at D.C. That is the city that stands out right now. And by the way, New York is filthy. We saw what happened out in L.A. with the ICE raids, where the MacArthur Park, where everyone's a zombified drug user or illegal alien or both. So it's not like our other cities are doing great either. But this is a city that's unique for a couple of reasons. One, we have no excuse to let it fester because it is our capital. This is where our government takes place. And if we're an excellent society, we will have an excellent capital. There's no way we have the nicest capital on earth anymore, and that should embarrass us. That should not be acceptable if we intend to be an excellent nation, because the bones are there in D.C. It's a very cool part of the world. It's very cool architecturally. We got the monuments, we got the museums, you got the cherry blossoms, you got some cool weather. The falls there are great. There's nothing more iconic for me than a Georgetown fall. Like, I just love it. I just love the idea of it. For some of you, it might be the cherry blossoms if you've been there, which is so cool in the spring. So there's no real excuse unless we just decide we're going to throw our hands up and we're going to do anything. Now, that's kind of where I'm at with New York, because I just don't see a path back. I look at that race. I see Zohran Mamdani, and he's calling for seizing the means of production, and we're going to globalize the intifada, and we're going to nationalize or, take over the grocery stores by the city. And then your alternative is Andrew Cuomo, who sent all of the ailing coronavirus infected seniors in to essentially kill the other healthy seniors. And he could potentially be the mayor. And then his solution to Zohran Mamdani talking about rent control and figuring out that he lives in a rent-controlled house, even though he's got money, Cuomo now wants to ban or create some sort of a threshold so that people can't live in rent-controlled apartments in New York if they have a certain economic threshold. All that's going to do is put the squeeze more on people economically. So it's not viable. He can't do that. This guy's got terrible ideas. All he has is terrible ideas, and he's so full of himself, and he's such a narcissist. It's the only reason why he keeps running. Eric Adams has no popularity. Curtis Lewa seems like a good man, but I don't see how he's going to win. So in that case, you look at the crime, you look at the filth in New York, and you think, I don't know what can be done. But in D.C., there is something that can be done, and Donald Trump is doing that. And that's the big news for today is Liberation Day in D.C. He's invoked 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act, placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control. This is a very aggressive move. He's activating the National Guard as well. And here's the quote. Trump said, Liberation Day in D.C., we're going to take our capital back. We're going to take it back under the authorities vested in me as President of the United States. And he goes through the statute. Very good people. They're tough, referring to the D.C. Metropolitan Police. They know what's happening. They've done it before. And he's going to be deploying National Guard. I got some audio. Let's play the president today. This is pretty cool.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States. I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control, and you'll be meeting the people that will be directly involved with that. Very good people, but they're tough, and they know what's happening, and they've done it before. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly. And you people are victims of it, too. You know, you're reporters, and I understand a lot of you tend to be on the liberal side, but you don't want to get mugged and raped and shot and killed.
No, you don't.
And you all know people and friends of yours that happened. And so you can be anything you want, but you want to have safety in the streets. You want to be able to leave your apartment or your house.
And that became a real thing. There were certain areas in D.C. you just wouldn't want to be out at night, and they were expanding. I always have a check. You guys hear me say this on the show a lot, and you'll hear me more now that I'm pointing out what I do, is I say, how we doing? Or how's that going? And what I'm doing here is I'm asking directionally, how are we doing in a certain regard? Now, when I paint the picture of D.C., July 4th on the rooftop watching fireworks after I had a nice run in Georgetown by the Potomac with my dog, and I'm eating a designer cupcake and I got a great cup of coffee going, and there's 7 craft breweries around. Like, that was the DC that I was experiencing 8-9 years ago. Is that happening now? It's not happening now. What's happening to big balls is happening. They're getting pummeled in the street. So that's increasingly people's concept of DC. And Trump looks at it. You look at it, you see directionally, are we doing? Not good. Can I do something? Yes, I can. And he does something in a way that controls the narrative. I think Caroline Leavitt had tweeted out, she had like 12 different TV networks. They're all watching the press conference. They're all watching Trump in there. And Trump was hilarious. There are moments, I won't play all of them for the sake of time, but he was hilarious during the press conference. And this is him doing a signature Trump move. He drives around, he notices problems, he asks if he can fix them, he wants to fix them, he's going to try to fix them. And this also controls the narrative so that he's in charge. So I'm looking at a headline now suggesting maybe this isn't the end from Mediaite, like whether or not he could go after Chicago, New York, or LA next. Good, please. If it's not legal, then I don't know how he's going to pull off. But if it is legal, please come help me in LA. Absolutely. I'd love that. There's a huge tension in my life is that I live this suburban life just north of LA. And Monday through Friday, it's terrific. We walk to school. We have great interactions with the families at the T-ball team. And life is great. But then on the weekends, when you want to eat and shop, I got to go down to LA and there's nervous time. Everyone's bummed out, everyone's rude, everyone's grumpy, everyone's honking the horns all the time, and you see the shoplifting. You go in the wrong neighborhood, you see the actual violence. Certain neighborhoods are off limits that used to not be. My famous video on my Instagram, you go to the La Brea Tar Pits. It's a tent city now. Natural History Museum over there. It's a tent city. It's the VA on one of the most valuable piece of property on the planet, Westwood, tent city. What's going on here? Why? Directionally, we're going the wrong way in our cities. So we've got a choice. And the choice is whether or not we're going to hold our hands up, throw our hands up, do nothing, or whether or not we're going to do something. And this is where breaking the law does come in here, is that I've diagnosed this. I do this in the beginning of the book where I kind of walk through where I think the left went wrong in terms of law and order. But I talk about how we could make it easier to prosecute in our cities. But the left, particularly Soros-funded DAs, who are in charge of half of them at least, the answer is too obvious why they don't do this. Because to crack down on crime would lead to a drastic statistical uptick in crime in the short term. And that would make the ruling class look bad because you would be in power and be like, oh, wow, look, crime went up. It didn't really go up, though. Enforcement went up. So one way to make it look like there aren't as many felons is to let people out of jail. And that's what the Democrats have been doing. It's politically safer for them. In terms of their ability to retain power, it's safer for them in single-party states, not where there's a viable Republican Party, but in these cities where there's no Republican Party. It's more politically viable for them to let crime fester than to actually address it. So it is the fact that they do nothing is actually an admission that things are bad. But Trump in one city on the planet, he's got a chance to do something. He's doing it. So it's DC, where he can invoke this rule, and he's in, and let's see what he does. And I can't wait. I can't wait because we'll go back to DC a lot. I mean, I'll probably be there every other month at least for the year. So I will routinely get to report back on how things are going. And I think things are going to be helpful in a lot of ways. So good for him for doing this. And I look forward to seeing what it looks like. I don't know what it's going to look like yet. So, but I'm completely all for it. And then if he figures out a creative way to put the pressure on the bad guys when it comes to the rest of our cities, I think we want to have excellent cities in this country. I know I've kind of given up on New York. I'm sure a lot of you guys have given up on LA, which I don't think you should. There's a lot of right-wing people out here who are very productive. But you can't give up on all of them. And DC is a perfect example of one where we should not, because it's so associated with our federal government. And our goal is to be occupying it, so to speak, by winning elections anyway. So that's the one where we got to start. But we want to be the exporters of culture around the world. A lot of that culture comes from our cities. We want to have the best restaurants and the best shops and the best fashion and the best style. We don't want to just only have the best churches and the best, politicians. We want those too, of course. But we want America to be the hub for global culture as well. And that's going to take place in our cities. It's not all going to take place. It's churches is of course culture, but other than that, a lot of the culture is going to take place in those cities. So let's make them excellent, and let's try to bring those people around to our side when we clean up these places. So I'm pretty happy about that. A lot of deep state lashing out. Maybe Misty, we can pull some low lights. Janine Pirro's out there. She's very articulate, so she just got confirmed by the Senate, so she'll be heading up some of this. Pete Hegseth says specialized units are ready to roll. Good, great, let's do it. I'm all in. All right. You guys also know that I am all in on the state of Israel. Big Israel guy. You guys know this about me. I'm not buying in all the stuff that's happening online. And so I'm decided to share with you something that's close to my heart, and that is the people of Israel. The Bible teaches us that in a world full of broken promises, one covenant remains unshakable, and that's God's eternal promise, his unwavering commitment to Israel, his beloved people. And now more than ever, God's calling Christians everywhere to support Israel to be a living testimony that his promises endure forever. I've chosen to partner with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews as one way to align myself with God's eternal plan. For over 40 years, this wonderful ministry has faithfully provided nutritious food, care, and life-saving aid to Israel's most vulnerable people, the poor and the elderly, many of whom are Holocaust survivors. And when crisis strikes, like rocket attacks or urgent humanitarian needs, IFCJ is already on the ground responding with compassion and support. So join me in standing with Israel and declaring God's faithfulness to all generations. To learn more, easy, here's what you got to do. Go to ifcj.org. That's International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, ifcj.org. Check it out now, and I'm really glad they're with me on the show. All right, one other thing that I want to note, where I think we kind of had this one right at the Marlowe Show and not necessarily elsewhere in your favorite online platforms. Some of the polling data is coming back in on some of the Epstein stuff, and we're trying to get a sense of what people really care about in this movement. And check this out. This is from CNN's Harry Enfield.
I would say that this is, from at least a political point of view, quickly turning into a dud of a story. What am I talking about here?
Which is wild.
Which is wild.
This has been for 3 weeks now.
Exactly. Take a look here. Google searches for Epstein down 89% versus just 3 weeks ago, falling through the floor. It is no longer the top term searched alongside Donald Trump's name. That's been trading off between Taros and Vladimir Putin, with obviously the meeting coming up later this week. But at this particular point, the American people's interest in this story, it's quickly becoming something of a nothing burger.
So out of sight, out of mind, maybe, is applying here a little bit. But has it impacted, have you seen numbers that have impacted Trump's popularity, favorability, anything?
No, not really. I mean, take a look here. Let's take a look at the overall numbers. Trump's approval rating in July of 2025, it was 45%. It's still well within that margin of error here at 44%. And you compare that to where he was in his first term at this point. He was at 37%. So he's 7 points higher, very much in a different political universe now, significantly higher in terms of his overall approval rating than he was at this point in his first term.
Okay, so this is saying that Twitter is not real life, and the Epstein obsession that's in your feed on X, the Everything app, is not necessarily reflective of where the broader voting public is. And I want to be able to broker something here. I want to broker a piece, because I know a lot of you in my audience are hyper online people, and you're probably shocked and appalled of the way the Trump administration handled the Epstein stuff and very discouraged. And some of you, I think, are maybe more of the boomer, I listen to radio style people, and we love you. We only have the best boomers. But I'm in the middle ground here. And I think that there's got to be lessons learned, and I want to be cautious here. But overall, my thought was this was not really a top tier issue for a lot of people who actually go and show up and vote. There might be some people who provide online energy, and that's not to be dismissed. But the Epstein issue was a sign, I think a lot of younger people, maybe new to the coalition, that if Trump could bust Epstein and his network, then get all the records out there into the public, then this could be a way of sending a signal that we are the transparency party, that we're the hold everyone accountable party. We're the bust the global cabal of pedophiles that probably exist to some extent, though it's hard to know exactly. Bust some of them, and that would look very good, and for certain groups of people. But overall, that group of people is very loud online and not necessarily as numerous when it comes to people who are actually likely to vote in elections. So I don't want to miss the lessons learned here. It is promises made, promises kept is a core tenet of MAGA. So if we're not doing promises made, promises kept, we got problems. So I want to make sure that we're taking that into consideration at all times. You cannot be breaking promises. And Pam Bondi rolls out the binders with the influencers and saying, this is Epstein Files 1.0, implying there's going to be a 2.0 or volume 1, whatever she said. And there's nothing in volume 1 and there's no volume 2 that's bad, really bad. But overall, this is, as I predicted, one of those hysterias online. And I don't want us to fall into some of the traps of the woke left where we end up having our own hysterias. We end up having our own things that we blow out of proportion that does cut into our credibility to some degree with people, because the Epstein stuff is relevant. I'm interested to see who is involved, why we can't get clarity on it. All this stuff is important. But the bottom line is most people are going to the polls and they're going to be thinking about, did we get inflation under control? How's the jobs market actually doing? Did we start doing something on immigration? How is these trade deals coming together? Are we in more or fewer global wars? That's really what's going to animate people more. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some people who are hyper online who don't just care about this stuff. But that's, as of now, I think a relatively small part of the coalition, and the polling backs it up. So I just want to add that, because it's important to see what matters. What matters? That's what I want this show to be about. And I'm very tempted sometimes to spin webs about stuff that doesn't matter. And I keep thinking about how I really want things to be what matters on the show. Maybe it's not fun. Maybe we should have more fun. I was checking out a show of some Gen Z guys who very popular YouTube show. And they're just, one guy brought in his favorite hamburger, and then the two hosts and a guest are just analyzing the hamburger, if it's any good. And I don't know. I could probably do that in an amusing way, but I'm not interested. Misty, do you want me to bring in my favorite burger and explain the sear on the outside of the burger and which cheese I chose? I mean, do you think that would be good content? I don't think that would be good content. People watch that stuff, but I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could fake it like an actor, but I don't know if I could do it with a straight face. Oh, the ASMR burger. No, that I could do. I'll watch that ASMR burger, but not the couple of, broskies breaking down the hamburger. All right. More stuff going on. Speaking of foreign wars, Trump's going to try to broker a Ukraine-Russia peace again. He spoke about this a little bit today. Let's hear this.
I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war. You got to end it. And he wasn't going to mess with me. This war would have never happened. We had a discussion about it one time, and we never had that discussion again. Would have never happened. And when the election was rigged, and then Biden took office, which was barely took office, the auto pen took office, bad things started happening. Bad things, stupid things were said, and it ended up in a war. And and I don't believe this will happen anymore because I have that pretty well covered. This could end up in a third world war. This could have been a third world war. I don't think that's going to happen now. But I thought it was very respectful that the president of Russia is coming to our country as opposed to us going to his country or even a third-party place. But I think we'll have constructive conversations. Then after that meeting, immediately, maybe as I'm flying out, maybe as I'm leaving the room, I'll be calling the European leaders who I get along with very well. And, I have a great relationship, I think, with all of them.
So this is coming up this week, and this is a couple of things noteworthy. As I noted, I've been on my Breaking the Law kick lately, but Breaking Biden, the biggest legacy, I think, of that book will be mainstreaming the talking point and breaking it down with one of my favorite chapters in the book, that the Ukraine war was Joe Biden's fault, even more so than Putin's, arguably, and certainly second to Putin at worst. Maybe first of all, because his policy was so horrible in the region, baited Putin into invading. And this is something that Trump's team weaponized. They mainstreamed it. And I think that that's really a big part of why I think people lost faith in Joe Biden, because Joe Biden prided himself for 50 years as being the national security guy. So Trump is right to always hammer this point. Trying to broker the peace, Putin coming to America is significant. I think this is something that Trump would like to see off his plate. I think he would love to see this peace brokered. I think he sees this as it could be a huge legacy for him to having ended the war that only started because of Biden. I think this continues to be a priority of his, and we'll see if we can make some progress this week. But that war is getting it seems to be uglier by the minute. I don't see Putin's thinking increasingly, and I think that I'm curious to see what is going to happen, and that will be a big centerpiece, I think, of the news later in the week when Putin comes. So it'll be a huge event. So we got that coming up, and stay tuned to this show on Breitbart.com for the latest. Mark Rutte, NATO secretary, was talking about some of this stuff. Let's hear from him.
And I think it is very good that President Trump will test him, and we'll see how far he can get on Friday, starting this process. He basically broke the deadlock.
I don't like when he calls him President Trump. I like when he calls him Daddy. That's his name. That's what he should call him.
President Trump in February, starting the dialogue with Putin. I think that was crucial. We had a great NATO summit under his leadership, committing to 5% defense spending, so that it is a clear signal to our main threat, which is Russia, that we are serious. And then he opened the floodgates 3 weeks ago of American lethal weapons to be delivered into Ukraine, coordinated by NATO. And of course, the secondary sanctions. He started them with putting them on India, which is one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil and gas.
I like this guy's analysis. It's really interesting because I'm sure he's a big globalist. I'm sure I wouldn't like his overall politics, but he seems rational. He seems like he's doing the things. If he wants Ukraine to keep buying American weapons, if he wants India to not buy as much Russian oil, and if he wants to be able to have something where you're brokering this peace at a high level and not having a bunch of proxy wars breaking out, that Trump's going to be the guy to do it. So he plays to Trump's ego. He just seems pretty clever. Pretty clever. All right, good. So Trump will be on the phone with him right after. All right. The next thing I want to bring to your attention is, I got these great new sponsors that I'm indulging in something important to them right now. I've got this here, Diet Coke, and my signature move. I've never shared this on the show. I put the dent in the side of the can. That's how I distinguish it. It's like a nice little resting spot for my thumb. You'll always know it's a Marlowe Diet Coke because I got the thumb dent. I'm showing this up if you're not watching the screens. But that's how it feels nice on the grip because it's like a little resting spot, a little hook for your thumb. It also distinguishes it from all the 900 people who are always in my house drinking my Diet Cokes. But the American Beverage Association, I want you to think for a minute about the drinks you grew up with that you still love today, the ones you got to have at the barbecue or in the break room. We're talking Coke, we're talking Dr. Pepper, we're talking Pepsi. These iconic brands are part of the American story and have been for more than 100 years. With everyone talking about American jobs, lately, the companies behind these beverages have been walking that walk the whole time. America's beverage companies are making American products with American workers in America's hometowns. They employ over 275,000 men and women in 50 states. These are the people that show up every day, do the work, deliver for our economy and our communities, and they deliver for my family because I get my Diet Cokes and Diet Dr. Peppers. So you can see for yourself everything they're doing at wedeliveforamerica.org. Go to wedeliverforamerica.org. Good people, great partners. And I got to say, I like the product, as you guys know. All right, so next up, I want to do some breaking the law content. I know I've been hammering you guys with this, and we're going to move into a mode. So the way this stuff works, and this is important for those of you to understand where my head's at, because this is the Marlowe Show, so I should tell you what I'm thinking. So the first week goes from the moment the book's announced, the first week, so to speak, ends at noon on Tuesday after the book is out. And that's where they stop counting for the bestseller lists. And the bestseller lists are very important, not because I need the approval of the New York Times or whatever to know that I've done a good job. But when you can get the trophy, when you can get some sort of an accolade, then it gets certain people's attention. So maybe people who aren't familiar with my work or Breitbart as much, or people who maybe didn't respect us for a while, or maybe might be winnable to get back. Then when you can put those accolades out there, and it does help. It helps get the momentum because, again, I've got a lot of my biggest media coming up. So I got Don Jr. show, I've got Mark Levin's show coming up, Glenn Beck's show coming up, Scott Jennings show, Dinesh D'Souza. There's a huge laundry list of big things I haven't done yet that I will do. So the book will continue to be out there, I think, percolate. I think we're going to get new investigations, more on that in a second. But it is really useful to try to sell as many copies as I can by noon on Tuesday, the first day. So if you're checking this out and you're thinking you're going to get one, this is the time to do it because it does help me make sure that it's not close enough to cheat. I'm looking at the numbers, what I know so far, and I will certainly have enough sales to make all the various lists. But the problem is that the lists are editorial, particularly the New York Times. It's not just raw sales. It's often they will count different stores more. Like if it's a Manhattan independent bookstore, that might count more. They're not going to be selling a lot of breaking the laws over there. They'll do things like they'll discount maybe things like Amazon, or maybe counts a little bit less. And then they'll elevate books that they believe in more. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. They won't explain it. So I want to make it so it's close enough where they can't cheat. Like with Breaking the News, and I guess Breaking Biden as well. Breaking Biden, I might have got a little unlucky there, but Breaking the News in particular, they pushed me so far down the list, and that thing sold a mountain of books. And so it's always nice to, whenever you're able to get that, make it so that they can't cheat me, just because it helps with the momentum, et cetera. All right, so that's what's going on. And I put out some big stories from breaking the law that over the weekend that are really delightful. I went through my 8 reasons why I call for Tish James's prosecution on Friday's show. If you guys missed that, it doesn't look like many of you did. That show is a monster show, so it's pretty cool. Nice to see huge numbers for that. But if you did miss that, I recommend it. It's pretty cool. But I have a couple other big ones for you, and I won't give you all the details. You have to go to Breitbart.com for a little bit. But the first thing I did is I made recommendations of where the next investigation should begin, because we're at the beginnings of election season. Jack Smith and Tish James I would say they were the most obvious in need of an investigation, but there were many, many others, and I go through all of them. I go through Reid Hoffman, who funded the E. Jean Carroll case while he was going to the White House. Judge Lewis Kaplan, the judge in the E. Jean Carroll case, was a unbelievably partisan Democrat. And he was someone who made it so that certain pieces of evidence were admitted in the court that were very unfavorable for Donald Trump and very favorable for the prosecution. It's a civil case, but it feels like a prosecution. It feels like what it was. He threatened to put Alina Habba in jail, and then he ultimately allowed for the $90 million judgment against Trump, which was cruel and unusual, 8 times what E. Jean Carroll even asked for in that case. And the case was absurd from start to finish. So he wouldn't allow for things like the dress, which Carroll had, which would not have had Trump's DNA on it, as far as I could tell, or else they would have turned it over. That wasn't allowed. Her insane interview with Anderson Cooper, which I recount in the book, which is mind-blowing. He wouldn't allow that in the courtroom. Why not? Let's investigate. We spent a lot of time on Alvin Bragg and Matthew Colangelo, obviously need investigation. Nathan Wade needs investigation. The Fonnie Willis's boyfriend, who is a family lawyer, who was doing a bunch of trips to the White House during the case. Crazy. Jeff DeSantis, the former Biden White House aide, who was sent down to Georgia to work on the RICO case. How could that possibly be? I want to see him brought in. I go through in deep detail Lisa Monaco, Vanita Gupta. They are the real bad guys in the DOJ. Jack Smith and Merrick Garland, they get a lot of the attention because they were at the top, or Smith was the special counsel and Garland was at the top. But Monaco and Gupta, they were really the ones who were the left-wing activists who were controlling, I think, the levers of power in the Justice Department, and perhaps even more so a guy named Andrew Weissman, who was an MSNBC contributor and is a real lawfare architect. He was in special counsel Mueller's investigation into Trump, and he was able to leverage that into huge stores of power throughout the left. And he was a person who was either involved in the lawfare or commenting positively about it on MSNBC, or both. And Trump regarded him as the boss of a lot of the people at the top of the DOJ. So we got to bring him in, figure it out. And of course, I recommend bringing in Joe Biden. But I'll tell you today, it's not even up yet as we're recording it. I'm just finishing editing it. My biggest next person for investigation for me has got to be Juan Merchan. Juan Merchan, the judge in the Stormy Daniels case, the hush money case that was really about business records and not hush money, going through his background and through the way he handled that case, start to finish, absolutely insane. And all the details for you at Breitbart News and even more in the book. But let me give you a few examples. First of all, he's a Joe Biden donor. Okay, that's grounds for an ethics investigation right away. But then you learn that his daughter is a mega fundraiser for the Democrats. Not just someone who fundraised a little bit, but someone who fundraised 9 figures for Democrats in 2024. Lauren Merchan, $93 million campaign in that election cycle. Also, her company, Authentic Campaigns, bagged $36 million during the 2024 cycle, according to Open Secrets. So she's one of the most prolific Democrat fundraisers. She worked with Dan Goldman. She worked with Kamala for the People. Dan Goldman, of course, impeachment attorney, now congressman. The fact that her dad could be presiding over this trial is an outrage. Shouldn't have happened. Why did it happen? We got to stop it. Mershon used gag orders against Trump inappropriately, in my view. I asked Trump if the gag orders still apply 2025. He said nobody knows. He thinks he might be under a gag order from Juan Mershon right now. The court devolved into huge levels of debauchery. He allowed Stormy Daniels to wield clearly bogus testimony, even though he said he did not want the courtroom to be X-rated. Well, it became X-rated. And it became X-rated specifically because of Juan Mershon allowing it to be the case. But Trump wasn't allowed to bring in some of the character witnesses on his own behalf. But the main reason why there needs to be an investigation, in my view, is Trump had his Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights violated. This is probably the most complicated part of the book, so I'll try to do a brief summary here, and I recommend the article Breitbart and, of course, reading Breaking the Law. But the nature of the case was the statute of limitations had run out on key portions of it. And so in order to make it so that it was a felony, and they wanted to brand Trump as a convicted felon, that was the whole point of this, pure lawfare, trying to brand him as a convicted felon so that he is able to have that branding, that scarlet letter during the campaign. That was the whole point of all this. So in order to do that, they need to supercharge the misdemeanor by piggybacking onto another crime, suggesting that Trump had actually committed at least 2 crimes and he had broken one law in pursuit of violating a second law, and that's how they could get something that was a misdemeanor into a felony. This is a novel approach. It's not tried often, if at all. But Trump was denied his Sixth Amendment rights in that he was actually not informed of the nature of the second charge. And there's actually a third charge, which is an even wilder story that, again, is easier to read than for me to explain in a podcast. But they actually had 3 charges, and the third charge was a sort of a choose-your-own-adventure charge. You didn't have to agree on the nature of the third charge. So we have no sense to this day if people unanimously agreed on what the third charge was against Trump. And Trump was not even informed of the second charge until jury instructions were read at the end of the trial. Clear violation of the Sixth Amendment, and I would argue also a violation of the Fifth Amendment because he lost his due process rights afforded there. So if you're not outraged now, I don't know what to tell you. He blocked a key witness, a guy who was an expert in Federal Elections Commission Act, FECA, a guy named Bradley A. Smith, one of the experts in the country on it. He was going to testify that Trump had not committed any election crime. They wouldn't let him do it. And the most offensive little detail at the end is that Juan Mershon tried to make sure that he was able to close this case in the transition specifically during the transition, because he knew that if the case dragged out past Trump being sworn in for a second term, then he would have had presidential immunity and the thing would have just died. But because Mershon was able to enter that final decision, January 10th, 2025, this meant that he stuck the convicted felon branding to Trump, and it's on Trump to do probably years worth of expensive appeals while he's president, distracting him in that way, if he wants to clear his name. And I'm sure Trump does, but why does Trump want to think about this? And why do we believe that's acceptable to have some judge in New York make it so the president of the United States is distracted by his name being dragged through the mud by Democrat operatives in the election year? That's it. That's the point. It's all election interference, all horrible. And I list another half a dozen crimes in there, or what could be crimes, which should be investigated in there. So that is what I got to say. And I'm just telling you, my final little pitch to all of you, and I think this is a very important point to make here, is that we're at the beginning of investigation season. We're going to have another 5 more, 10 more, 15 more. I don't know however many more. But every single one of these people involved in the Russia collusion hoax, involved in the lawfare, a lot of them are going to be the same people. They need to be held to account. These people need to be held to account, or there will not only be no justice for President Trump, they will do it again. The lawfare playbook will be applied for the next election and the next election and the next election. That will go on interminably until we don't have a country left. There's no semblance of law and order whatsoever. So to connect the dots here, I think the spirit of what Trump is doing in D.C. is the spirit of restoring law and order in our society. Sealing off the border, holding the Russiagate conspirators accountable, taking care of D.C., and now busting all the lawfareistas, in particular Letitia James and Jack Smith. But next up, let's get Juan Mershon. Let's get him investigated. So let's see how that goes. because at a minimum, it'll send a signal to the next round of people who want to play politics with our legal system. They better think twice about it. All right, that's today's show. Thanks to Misty. Thanks to our social media guru, John Cassio, for all the help. Thanks to all of you in the audience, especially if you're new here. Leave a comment, 5-star review, send me an email, aloha@alexmarlow.com. Thanks to our terrific sponsors, and I will talk to you tomorrow.